Good morning and welcome to the opening remarks of the 19th Annual Northwest Interlibrary Loan and Resource Sharing Conference. Today's date is Wednesday, September 9th. My name is Miriam Wnuk and I am the presenter for this session. These opening remarks are being recorded with permission of the conference and it retains the copyright to the information being presented. At this time, it is planned that recordings will be available in the next several weeks as committee members are able to review recordings and proofread captions. Attendees will be notified when recordings are available. While the Q&A function is available during this session, there will not be a Q&A during opening remarks. Please save your questions for our keynote at this time. While this is a webinar format, all attendees should be muted and videos off. The door prize code word will be revealed between the keyword presentation and Q&A. The link for the form is on the sched and will be placed in the chat. Now that the formalities are done, as I said, my name is Miriam Wnuk, and I am the NWILL 2020 chairperson. Until the end of this past July, I was the Access Services Specialist at City University of Seattle in Seattle, Washington. Or should that be Woodinville, Washington, as I had been working remotely for 6 months. In that role, I was the Interlibrary Loan Manager, Cataloger, Circulation Lead, Library Systems Assistant, Copyright Expert, and the former Student Employee Supervisor. I was one of those people who did a little bit of everything. Unfortunately, my position was a COVID casualty, and it was eliminated a month and a half ago. If anybody would like to talk to me about that, you can find me at the social events peppered throughout the conference. While my role as chairperson this year has kept me busy, none of this would be possible without my committee and their hard work. Well, not everyone may know this. NWILL is an all-volunteer committee, and nobody is paid by the conference for the work they do. Each person listed here has helped move this conference forward in one way or another. I would like to shine a special light on a few of these people. Summer Steele from Oregon Health and Science University is one of the immediate past chair people, and she chose to stay on the committee this year in a lesser role. Her guidance has informed many of my decisions this year. David Moody from Chapman University is my registration coordinator, and he worked hard to create our registration pages and to make sure your questions were answered in a timely manner. And Natalie Logue from Georgia Southern University, who worked with our vendors to create a rewarding program for everyone and discovered our virtual social and vendor space, Remo. All this while being 3 time zones ahead of most of the committee, or behind, depending on how you want to look at that. I would love to thank each and every one of these people individually, but I'm sure you would rather not hear me sing their praises for well over an hour or 2 or a week. In addition to thanking my committee, I would like to give a very special thank you to Joanne Hallgren, the founder of NWILL. Several weeks ago, she reached out to the committee to offer funds to provide a scholarship to several attendees at this year's conference. With her assistance, we were able to refund the registration fees for 8 furloughed or unemployed attendees. While Joanne has not directly been involved with NWILL for several years, her brainchild that she started 19 years ago is still going strong and independent. While NWILL is an independent conference, we still have sponsorship from institutions in ILL that many of us use. This year, Emporia State University's School of Library and Information Management sponsored our use of sched. OCLC offset our Zoom license, and Atlas Systems sponsored our Keynote, Scott Brown. Additional sponsorship comes from Rapid ILL and Reprint's Desk. Historically, this is the place in the opening remarks where the chairperson talks about and shows pictures from the pre-conference tour. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury this year. Instead, I have pictures from last year in Portland, Oregon. As you can see from these pictures, I would usually be speaking to an auditorium full of people and making new friends. If you're curious about the ping pong table, I can tell you that the woman is Natalie from this year's committee, and the man is one of this year's presenters, Johannes Lotz. They had a competition during the conference, and another attendee sent them each a little trophy. If you would like to know more about the story, I'm sure you can find one of them in our Remo social rooms sometime during the conference. However, planning the 2020 conference wasn't easy this year. Like many things, it started right and then went off track. Believe it or not, planning for this year's conference starts almost immediately after the last one ended. It's a never-ending cycle. And our original plans were going fine until late February, and Seattle, where I am, started to feel a little not right. While we had already put out a call for proposals in late January that were due in mid-March, the committee realized that everyone was in a scramble mode in mid-March, and a second round of proposals was sent. This is why you see a mix of sessions, non-COVID and COVID-related, as the committee recognizes that while many things have changed in the last 9 months, some things are inherently part of our work and are important to know about. By late April, the conference decided that we would be virtual, and once we confirmed with our presenters that they could join us in this adventure, we moved forward. This is one of the reasons registration opened late, because we were still figuring out all the kinks. But I'm happy to say that NWILL 2020 is a sold-out event with nearly 500 people registered. This is 3 times our usual attendance, and we hope to have a good impression on all the new attendees to our conference. Speaking of, the attendees at this conference are from all over North America and represent 39 states, plus Washington, D.C., 6 provinces, and several attendees from Zayed University in Dubai of the United Arab Emirates. While on this slide, I would like to pause and acknowledge the number of libraries that are in fire danger at this time. I know of at least one public library that was destroyed in Whitman County, Washington this past weekend, when a fire destroyed 80% of the town, including the librarian's home. Please, everyone, be safe during this time. Additionally, we come from a diverse group of libraries, including nearly 50 people from public libraries, several from state libraries, and 3 tribal libraries. One group I would like to see represented in the future is prison libraries, as I know they do interlibrary loans, but they are often underrepresented. Now, the fun part. We have 2 games during the conference this year. NWILL traditionally has a vendor game and a name tag raffle at our in-person conference. And we opted not to give up on tradition. So each session will have a code word image shared by the convener and that the convener is the committee member, between the presentation and the Q&A. You must be present to learn what this is, as they will only have it up for a short time. There is no way of knowing exactly how long the presentation will last. You will then go over to the Google form and select the session, type the word, and provide your contact information. If you attend every session, you will be entered for the grand prize of free registration for the 2021 conference. The second game involves our vendors and attending the vendor social and Remo after our short meal break this afternoon, or this evening, late afternoon if you're on the East Coast. While in the social room, you'll want to visit at least 3 of the 5 vendors and ask for their unique code word. This is an opportunity to learn about their products firsthand, and if you're already a customer, to maybe check in and ask specific questions. Please note some vendors may have multiple tables, but they will have the same code word. The vendor game has its own form. Winners from today and Thursday will be announced on Friday during closing remarks. However, sessions from Friday will be announced via email. Now, a note about new technologies, as you may have learned a little bit about me and technology this morning. I've mentioned Remo several times now for social and vendor space. Remo is like a giant room full of tables with seats for 2, 4, and 6 people. In this case, our room has space for 500 people, so as many people as who have registered. As an attendee in the room, you have the ability to move yourself around and talk with people at the table using voice, video, and typed chat. It's very similar to having lunch with a group of people at the traditional NWILL. Please note that it can be buggy with iPads and cell phones, so using a laptop or desktop computer is recommended. Additionally, Zoom is being used as the presentation platform for this conference, and there will be a mix of webinar and large meeting setups. For most of the committee, this is the first time we are using Zoom for more than just a few people in a meeting. And while we tested the systems, there is nothing like a room of 400 to learn how to do everything. So please be gracious, as you may have already noticed that this morning. Also, for the first time, we are using Sched as a digital program that is easy to update and that you are welcome to provide immediate feedback to. Finally, we are using an unlisted YouTube channel for our pre-recorded and eventually recorded live sessions. Currently, only our pre-recorded lightning rounds are posted, which will have a live Q&A on Friday before closing remarks. However, once we have proofread the captions of our recorded sessions to ensure ADA accessibility, we will release sessions from this year's conference. Oddly enough, one of the requests from last year's closing remarks was that we record our sessions. I'm now wondering if somebody rubbed the genie's lamp and wasn't super clear about how they wanted that goal to be achieved. Please discuss among yourselves and during the social time. Either way, please let us know in the post-conference survey about these technologies and their usefulness. One or more of these may become regular tools. Now, a few notes about our schedule. Please remember to take the survey for the OCLC Atlas Systems virtual workshop. The link for this survey was sent out last Friday for those who were registered ahead of time. However, you will also find it embedded in the Sched link for the program, which is at 2 p.m. Pacific tomorrow afternoon. Additionally, please note that Session 8, Rebuilding the ILL Department by Todd Campbell, has been canceled. In its place, we've extended our morning networking session in Remo. That session is on Friday morning. Finally, I would like to thank our presenters of the 19th Annual NWILL Conference. Without them, we would not have content to share with the community. These people come to us from all over North America and include one academic tribal librarian and one public librarian. I point these two voices out because NWILL is always looking for a variety of voices, but we can only accept proposals from those who submit them. So please submit them. Now, I would be remiss in these opening remarks if I didn't say something about if you have technical issues during a virtual conference, because as we all know, if you ignore it, it's bound to happen. So, if you need assistance during the conference, please email nwillconf@gmail.com and a committee member will forward you to someone who can help at that moment. This information is also available at the top of the Sched. Please keep in mind that there are nearly 500 of you and the active committee members are a little over a dozen people. Please be patient with us. And now, before introducing our keynote, I would like to remind the attendees that this session is being recorded, and you should place any questions in the Q&A section of the chat, unless directed otherwise. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Scott Brown from Oracle. Scott works in Portland, Oregon, and started his career in libraries in the 1980s. He was recommended to the NWILL committee by the former NWILL chair, Michelle Knapp, after hearing him speak on a panel titled Defining Community at the San Diego SLA Fall Seminar in October 2019. His background includes adjunct faculty at the San Jose State University High School, public speaking, and holding the unique title of Cybrarian. So Scott, what is a Cybrarian? Please give me a moment while I stop my screen share.
Thank you. Thank you, Miriam. What is a Cybrarian? That's a good question. So before I jump into and answer the question, I want to say, first of all, thank you, Miriam, for leading this effort. Thank you to all the volunteers. Thank you to Joanne as well, Joanne Halgren, for sponsoring the scholarship. And thank you to Atlas Systems for sponsoring this session. Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for being here. And I hope you're well and staying well. So let me talk a little bit about this title of Cybrarian. So I was actually first hired in 2014 at Oracle, and my actual HR title is Cybrarian in the HR system, which surprised me in a lot of ways. Part of me, I had an interesting reaction to it initially. It felt kind of impersonal to me, kind of robotic a little bit. At the same time, it also felt kind of corny. It felt like the 1990s almost. And when you, at least at that time in 2014, when I kind of went out looking to see if other people were called Cybrarians, I Googled it, and what came up was, pictures of cyborgs and stuff like that. Now, if you Google it, you actually get a definition from Google and other people who are using the term Cybrarian. But my change happened when I was using the title, or I had it in my signature, and people were kind of intrigued by it. It provided an interesting hook for people where they could kind of understand what it was. And I love the Google definition here. It's a librarian or researcher who uses the internet as an information source, which includes just about everybody. But people were intrigued by it when I mentioned it, or when they saw it, and they wanted to know more, which so I've kind of come to reconcile myself to the title and actually kind of embrace it, because it does enable kind of an immediate connection. A lot of what I do at Oracle is doing online research. So the title is apt and it fits, and sharing resources across the company, resources that are available to everyone across the company. But when Miriam first asked me back in, I think it was December, to Keynote, I did a couple of things. One is I immediately jumped on the Interlibrary Loan listserv to kind of reacquaint myself with the community. And I started thinking back across my career around the concept of Cybrarian. In other words, were there ways that I've been using technology in my job ever since I started back in the 80s. And my first job was actually at the Santa Cruz City and County Public Library based in Santa Cruz, California. So you see that picture on the left side there. The picture, and it's not a very good picture, my apologies, on the right-hand side is a picture of the circulation desk, and it looked pretty much exactly like that when I was there. The computers that you see on the desk did not connect anywhere outside of the building. They connected to a main computer, and we knew about the holdings, but they did not really connect to the outside world, so to speak. But I did have the opportunity. I started as a page, I did circulation, and I actually did Interlibrary Loan for the Santa Cruz City and County Public Library for about 1.5 years. And the cooperative that I worked with was the Monterey Bay Area Cooperative Library System, MOBAC. If you're familiar with that acronym and that entity, it's now part of the Pacific Library Partnership. And when I was doing it, I was using this exact machine, which is an IBM PC from the early 1990s. I want to say probably 90, 91 maybe. And it was great to get this picture because this is the exact machine that I used. And I don't remember, Miriam and I talked about this, I don't remember what the system was. I believe it was a modem dial-up. I would input my requests into the system, make the modem connection, dial it up, the request would go out, the request would come back, and it was all physical lending. There wasn't anything like the electronic resources that we have. That was just kind of inconceivable. But at the same time, what was fascinating to me about working in an interlibrary loan is that we were able to reach outside of our system and find and get access to content that was just really, really difficult to find otherwise. And it really was, I think, in the experience of my patrons then and in chatting with other ILL folks as well, it was kind of magic, right? You were able to deliver this content that they, in a lot of instances, just maybe thought wasn't attainable. And it kind of put me in the mind of the Arthur C. Clarke quote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Now you can argue whether or not an IBM PC from the early 90s is sufficiently advanced technology, but it was magic. There's one instance where I was able to get a book of a particular photographer. It was Joel Peter Witkin, who I'd never seen before, and very kind of intriguing photographs, but able to get this into the hands of a patron, and it was just something that he wasn't able to get anywhere else. And so being a part of that was just really exciting. And again, certainly a much lower tech version, but I kind of think of this as my initial foray into cybrarianship, and now we're kind of all in that space. Now you've got things like Silver, the streaming interlibrary loan video resources. That session is coming up immediately after this, where that was just inconceivable at the time that I was doing it. But I share these because what's interesting in having joined the listserv ever since January and kind of watching us all as a community go through this massive switch where we're trying to adjust to changing circumstances and drastically changing circumstances for a variety of reasons. But watch how the community, the interlibrary loan community, has adapted to that and made the best of what we have in order to continue to serve our customers, our patrons, our audience has just been phenomenal. And so part of what I want to cover in the talk today are a few different things. So one is this idea of community, interlibrary loan as a community, and the value that we provide, whether that's within our organization or institution, how we kind of highlight that in our career. And then I want to come back to the idea of community in relationship to the conference itself. So that's kind of where I'm hoping to go at the front end of the conference here. So before I go too much further, I'm using the word community. You're going to hear me use it a lot. What I want to understand a little bit is kind of get your ideas around community. When we talk about community, what are we talking about? You can go ahead and use the chat screen. If you use both the panelists and attendees send, go ahead and throw some words into there, and we'll go ahead and see what comes up. And I think I can find my chat screen here. For some reason, the chat screen is not coming up for me. Miriam, I'm not sure if, there we go. Excellent. Okay, thank you. So I'm seeing support, group of individuals with a like-minded goal. People connected by common interest, sharing, connectedness. I see Troy walking into the burning apartment room. I'm not quite sure about where that one's coming from. Bound by similar interests, professions, values, or beliefs. Common job duties. Excellent. Very good. Yes, all safe to disagree with mutual respect, mutual support. Yep, excellent, excellent. Okay. Support, a lot of ideas around support and kind of common visions, common goals, common values. Yeah, Absolutely. So let me share with you. This is the definition from Merriam-Webster, and I'm pulled out certain pieces of this just as a way to highlight some of the things that really catch my eye around community. So certainly what you've talked about is this unified body of individuals, right? There's interaction, and what's interesting to me, again, looking back at this now, this concept of being in a common location. Well, we're physically not in a common location as we might normally be, but we're in this common virtual space, right? We have this interacting population. It's interesting to me to see within this definition that there is that aspect of professional interests. Now, certainly community is not limited to professional interests, but it's, again, kind of fascinating to me to see this piece in the definition. Certainly this ownership and participation and a lot of social activity. And I really like the idea of support as well, and that has come up. And that makes sense, particularly now, right, where we're all kind of muddling or doing well, getting through the situations that we're dealing with, even on a daily basis, and trying to make the best of that, right, and providing support as part of that process. And what I would add, and kind of again watching this change from beginning of January to now, is some things that I would potentially add, and what I really notice is this idea of adaptability and resilience. And again, a hallmark of a really healthy community, and that's absolutely what I've seen in the interlibrary loan community. How do we deal with this? Suddenly we're away from our physical collections. How do we continue to deliver service? How do we continue to keep some continuity? How do we just, now that materials are coming back and we're starting to go into the space of starting to lend physical materials again, and watching people come together and essentially do problem solving, right? And being solution oriented, whether it's someone who's sharing a practice that they have that's working, or really kind of coming together as a community or some part of the community in order to come up with a best practice that's potentially going to work for people. And then finally, the thing that I think is really missing here, and which I've observed in a lot of different ways, is this idea of humanity and humor. Occasionally on the list, the idea of being able to share a little bit more that is not necessarily just doing our job or getting what we need to get done. Having expressing that it is a very stressful time and being able to commiserate around those kinds of things. And then this idea of humor as well. Somewhere, I forget when it was, if it was March or April, Peter Collins, the director of resource sharing at OCLC, excuse me, hold on a sec. You might know what I'm about to say. Excuse me. He started this thread about the three-letter OCLC symbol, right? And he had a great set of three-letter symbols that he started with, and then other people started sharing theirs. One was COW, cow, for the Western State Colorado University. I saw SOS, caught my eye, Southern Oregon University. Someone brought up JFK is actually for the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, which great irony there. LIMRA, International Information Center, is God. I don't know that it gets much better than that. But I do appreciate that Loyola Law School is LOL. But being able to kind of share this and have this humor and a shared humor and a shared experience, I think is another key part of and a hallmark of a healthy community. One last way to kind of think about this is when you think about the qualities of a healthy community, how do communities come apart? And this is particularly relevant right now in a lot of different ways, not just the pandemic, but also things like the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of the change and unrest that's coming up from around that. The fires that we're dealing with, and when I included this slide, all the fires that were going on now were not going on. This is actually from the 2017 Gorge fires. But there are certain uncontrollable factors that we don't have control of. Furloughs, layoffs, rapid change, a lot of uncertainty and disruption in the system. But also things like silos and division, where there's these seemingly hard divisions between groups, between functions, between responsibilities, fragmentation, lack of communication and disengagement. And so we're seeing a lot of that right now. But when you look at the flip side of that, for, again, a healthy community, healthy engagement, you've got things like being able to bridge across different departments or across different functions, being able to communicate well, and in some instances over communicate, and a sense of engagement. And so I'm sharing a few ideas with you just to kind of get you thinking about the qualities that are really existing and actively being displayed within the interlibrary loan community. And I want you to kind of hold on to that as we move on to this concept of value and kind of highlighting value. So I want to talk a little bit about community and value within your organization and how you might more easily recognize and then highlight value within your organization. There's some great sessions coming up, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. But the first part of this is really starting with recognizing value, because you can't really promote it effectively if you don't kind of have a clear picture and articulation of what it is that we're even talking about. So what value do we bring to our organizations, whatever that might be? And in chatting a little bit with folks, there's certainly a lot around efficiency. And there are different ways that we might illustrate that. Efficiency in time, that you're able to save potentially other people's time. You're able to do things in an efficient manner. Certainly maximizing the use of resources. The idea of keeping costs down and maximizing the spend and maximizing the value that you get for the spend that's going out. And then certainly this idea of being able to provide broader access to materials that are not a formal part of your collection. These are all, fantastic pieces of value that we can take a look at. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But I also, what I think is going to be really exciting, and I'm looking forward to all the sessions, to be honest, but a couple that I want to highlight for you and kind of that's going to reinforce what we're talking about here are on Friday, the 10 a.m. session from Georgia Southern University, ILL Operations in the Time of COVID-19, and the panel discussion on Friday as well, the ILL Response to COVID-19. Because I think there have been unique opportunities, value, and skills really that we've built that have been highlighted by the pandemic, right? Why did interlibrary loan continue to work? Maybe not at full capacity or 100%, but it did continue to work in a lot of cases. Why did it adapt, and what allowed it to adapt, and what is the value in that? And so I'm looking forward to those sessions, and I'm really, really excited about them. So once we kind of understand, okay, there is value there, how do we reposition it? And how do we highlight that for the folks that we want to highlight that to? And I've got a couple examples here. And the first one is more from kind of maybe a library director perspective. So you might say, well, we manage a $500,000 budget at a mid-sized university. The second one here, as a function, as an ILL function, we process 300 requests a month, most with 24-hour turnaround time and with an 80% fill rate. Now, these are actually quite good as they are, right? Good numbers, pretty specific, and they demonstrate to all of us, I think, that's good stuff. That's value, right? But when you think about repositioning your value and talking about your key customers, stakeholders, whoever that might be, what are the questions that you might ask yourself to model value or kind of highlight value? So in other words, if we put ourselves in the shoes of our faculty, what do they care about? What helps them get their job done? What saves them time and money? And another way to look at it is, what would be fantastic service from them? If they were to say, you gave me the best service that I've ever had because X, Y, and Z. This is what it did for me. What would that look like, and how might we rephrase these kinds of things? So just a few examples, and again, these are only one example of many that you could potentially put together. So if you say something like, we saved $50,000 in a very tight budget year, and we did that by identifying non-essential programs that could be reduced, that speaks to pretty much anybody in a management or leadership position, right? being able to save a specific amount of budget, especially under very tight conditions, is something that speaks loudly, right? On the other side, or the other example we have here, is we get impossible to find materials in the hands of our faculty within 24 hours. That's that magic part that I'm referring to. That has clear and very real value to the folks that you're trying to reach, that we're all trying to reach. And so the story becomes about them. The person that you're serving is the hero in the story, right? You've gotten them the impossible to find materials. You have helped them save $50,000. That's all very, very tangible value. Another way that you might take a look at this is maybe through the access provided via Interlibrary Loan. You make over $2 million worth of materials available to our patrons at no direct cost. It's all part of the Interlibrary Loan function. So just a few different ways that you might think about this and kind of reposition it within an organization. So then now we've got that repositioned value and are looking at promoting the value. There's a lot of different ways that we might promote that. And I'm not going to go into too much depth here. There's actually a great session coming up again from University of Pennsylvania on Thursday at noon PT. I'll share those details in just a sec. But how might you share this and kind of promote this value with your patrons or users? You know, how might you position it to them? Are you missing a key article for your research? Is there something that you're just not able to find anywhere else that we might be able to help you with? Again, I'm using very high level examples here. In talking with supervisors, directors, or other stakeholders, is there a case study or example that you might be able to share with them? Is it worthwhile meeting with them on a regular basis? Maybe it's quarterly basis or at the beginning of the year, where you can put forth a case around and promote that value to them and highlight it to them. And then connecting with other departments. Other departments may or may not be aware of the services available through Interlibrary Loan. So they may or may not be using them. How might they use them? Are there ideas that we might be able to actually promote to them? And are there ways that they're using them that we might be able to highlight even back to them as a larger group? And so maybe, doing awareness or training sessions. And this is where I do want to loop you back to the How Do I ILL Library session on Thursday, which is going to cover, it sounds like, different pieces of promoting this value strain. And so that's another one that I think is going to dive a little bit deeper into this concept. So let me move over to the idea of community and value in your career. So are there ways that you can potentially reposition your value to promote yourself and to promote your career? So I'm going to ask you to use the chat screen again. This one's maybe a little bit harder. So let me take a moment to kind of talk about this one, but please go ahead and start using the chat screen if you'd like. So give me one word or phrase. For someone who knows you well, what would they say is your key strength or your strongest quality? It might be, it might be a professional colleague, it might be a work colleague, it might be a manager or supervisor that you've had. Have they said that you are, detail oriented, or you have really strong leadership qualities, or, what's kind of the one word or phrase that they have used to describe you? And this might be something that you've heard over different positions or different interactions that you've had. Miriam might say of her group, they all are tremendously organized or right on top of things or attention to detail. So if you might want to go ahead and do to all panelists and attendees as well. This can be a difficult one, and it's okay to not have an immediate answer. And I'll walk you through a way to kind of get at this. And I'm just looking at the chat screen to see if anything's come up. I'm not seeing anything. Miriam, I'm not sure if you're seeing anything from your end. I just want to check.
It's a pretty long list, actually.
Okay.
Everything from patient to supportive to detail-oriented, collaborative, team-oriented.
Perfect.
Flexibility. There's a lot going on there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. For some reason, the chat isn't coming up on my side. So I appreciate you reading that out. Excellent. So you've got some handle on that. That's wonderful. So let me take a slight detour and indulge me a moment. And part of the reason that I talk about this is there's a formal exercise that you can do. It's called Reflected Best Self. And the formal version of this is you actually you pay money to use the system essentially. And what you do is something similar to this, but with a whole bunch of people. So you submit a list of names. Again, it can be friends, relatives, professional colleagues, peers, mentors, whoever it might be. And the ask for those folks is to have them share a story of when they've seen you at your best. And what it does is the report brings together all of these stories so that you have a chance to kind of understand better essentially kind of how you're showing up in the world. What are the qualities that other people are seeing, and what's that kind of external view of how you're interacting with the world. I actually assign kind of a mini version of this to my students when I teach my course at San Jose State. I ask them to only ask 3 people, and it's more along the lines of what I asked you. So, what do people think of when they think of you and your qualities? And I assign it because it does give this external perspective, this evidence of how we're showing up. And what's fascinating, and what I love, my favorite part of doing this is I will ask them what surprised them. Of those responses, what surprised them? I'll always get a few people who say, oh, nothing surprised me, I knew all of that. More often than not, someone is surprised because they're mentioning something that they really weren't fully aware of, or something that they had been working on and didn't think they were very good at. And what happens is oftentimes every single person is mentioning that quality. I've recently had a student say, I've really been working on my leadership skills, and I just didn't think it was showing up, but every single person mentioned my leadership skills. And so I share this as a way, and maybe something you might want to try yourself, to get at a way of illustrating kind of owning our value that might feel more authentic. I think generally as information professionals, we have a tendency not to highlight ourselves and not to necessarily own the qualities that we bring to any situation. And so this is difficult for a lot of us. And so it provides a way to do that. Let me provide an example, my own example, and I call this an extreme example. This is a picture of me in 2011, I think. And this example is from 2011. I was in a professional colleague's class. She had an alternative careers class and wanted me to talk about my career. But I was talking about this idea of you kind of bring this brand with you wherever you go. And so I chose to kind of do an extreme example where I had been talking for about 10 minutes in class. And I said, okay, I've been talking with you for about 10 minutes. You don't know me more than that 10 minutes. What qualities do you think I bring to things? What qualities are standing out to you? There was this pause for about, an uncomfortable pause for probably longer than I realized. And one person said, well, you kind of strike me as a charming dork. And I realized at that point, this was probably not a good exercise to do. We actually became good friends soon after that, and she's a great person. But then other responses started to come out. So you seem very creative, you seem very thoughtful, you seem to know your stuff. And I don't highlight these, as a way to promote myself, but to illustrate that even in a very short interaction, oftentimes people get an understanding of what your strengths are and where you're coming from. And this is something that I think it's important to be aware of and also potentially use to our advantage. And I want to take a moment to talk about kind of this introversion piece, because I think a lot of us, again, doing this work, tend to be more introverted. I actually consider myself an introvert. I get my energy from kind of regrouping and being by myself, and then I'm able to go out and do things like this. But we oftentimes think of this as a negative, right? Well, I'm an introvert, and so it's not such a good thing. But what's interesting is to hear some of these pieces in some of what you shared. So the way that introversion shows up is as being patient. You have a lot of patience. You're very attentive. What's really interesting is oftentimes information professionals report themselves to be the person to go to. They're approachable both personally, they provide that safe space, and they're highly knowledgeable. And that's an amazing combination when you bring those two together. And then the other one is calm, and I love this one because more often than not, what happens is someone will say, I go into a stressful situation and inside I am just falling apart, but other people see me as calm, and it's like this cognitive dissonance thing. But it's actually the way you're showing up is you are calm, and you're bringing that calmness to the situation. So I want to share that just as a specific example, because I think this is something that we all not wrestle with, but have to deal with at some point. And so I encourage you to think about these qualities in yourself, not necessarily just the introversion, but the patience, attentiveness, approachable, and calm, and the qualities that come from the interlibrary loan communities that are valuable strengths and actually assets for your career and for your organization. I have one other piece for you, and Miriam, I might stop the screen share so you can run the poll on this one. So what I want to ask, and let me share my screen again. Okay, there we go. Is how many years have you been working in libraries? So if you just go ahead and do that, I'm not necessarily doing that just to be nosy, partly, and this is the question here is how many years have you been working in libraries? Not necessarily just interlibrary loan, but in libraries in any capacity. And part of this is, and I know we'll end the poll soon, we've got almost 200 responses, which is great. But part of what I want to illustrate is the importance of these kinds of qualities throughout your career. And also to give you an idea a little bit of who's in the room, so to speak, who's in the virtual room. So why don't we go ahead and close the poll whenever you're ready, Miriam. And if you'd share those results. Interesting to see, I can see a preview. To see, it looks like nobody responding less than a year. A lot of folks 20 years or more. So that's excellent. Very, very interesting to see. So a lot of experience in the room, right? A wide spectrum of experience, which is great. So excellent. Thank you, Miriam. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. And I'm not sure if, let me close that out. Great, thank you. So what I want to talk about here, and I will make sure that you can get to this document. You can also find it on the San Jose State site. So this is from the San Jose State University iSchool. And every year they put together a snapshot of job postings in the spring. Now this one is a little unusual. Number one, it's full of great content. Feel free to go out and take a look at it. It has a lot of excellent detail looking at job titles across a variety of different library segments, as well as what those current titles are, what those job postings are looking for, kind of common qualities along the lines, for those positions. This one, it looked at 400 recent job postings from January to April of 2020. So just as the pandemic was happening, well before the Black Lives Matter protests started happening. So it's, kind of an interesting snapshot in time. 38% academic, 13% public, and then a smattering of kind of health, science, legal, medical, etc. And the one thing I want to share with you from this is they look at what are some of the most common qualities or skills that are in those job postings. And this is what comes out of it. So you see communication on the far left end at 250, where communication, is a desired skill, collaborative, values diversity, interestingly at 3, even before the Black Lives Matter protests, interpersonal, organizational, all the way down to problem solving, attention to detail, analytical. Great set of qualities. Number one, what's always interesting to me is that where are specific, quote, library skills here? And one answer is that they're embedded there, but there's nothing that's saying cataloging or, anything necessarily that specific. That is just really interesting to me. Number two is a lot of these qualities are, I think, already reflected in the interlibrary loan community. Certainly, problem solving, as I mentioned, attention to detail, prioritization, interpersonal, collaborative communication, a lot of great stuff there. And I think that already exists there. The reason I ask you about the levels and how long you've been is you might highlight different qualities based on where you might be in your career. So if you're going to more management, whether it's managing a department, managing people, you might highlight some of these differently, but these are all qualities that are potentially going to be important at different points in your career. So again, I love this report. But let me talk about and kind of share this in repositioning your value. So I'm going to kind of pull this back and talk a little bit about this piece. So you can certainly start with, a lot of us, I include myself in that, in my past experience, are solo practitioners, right? So processing 300 requests a month, most with 24-hour turnaround time with an 80% fill rate. Those are the details of what I do, right? So a way that I might reposition this and incorporate some of those qualities and key skills is saying, as a solo practitioner, I put those impossible to find materials in the hand of my faculty. I do those by drawing from a collaborative network spanning all of North America, for example. Or I might do that by prioritizing hundreds of requests a month in a timely and accurate fashion. So what this does is it puts the impact first and then says how I do that with the skills and the qualities that I have. And essentially what you're saying is I do magic, and this is how I do magic, right? So before I move on to and kind of wrap up and we go to the Q&A piece, I want to share a little bit about, just a little bit more about qualities. This piece is something I started maybe 10 years ago, but my goal was to talk with leaders or moderators of successful online communities, online only. So I started, again, about 10 years ago. I've talked with a few of them, and part of what I wanted to do was to understand, coming back to this idea of what are the qualities that make a healthy online community work? And again, not being in person, but these were very active online communities. Some were forums, some were online groups. I don't think I ever did a Twitter group, but just kind of asking for those qualities. And part of what was fascinating is I came to realize that the qualities of these online communities, the successful and very active and healthy online communities, actually reflected a lot of qualities that I think we all have as information professionals, as people working in doing what we do. And I came up with this catchphrase of InfoCitizen, which sounds a little Orwellian, but forgive me for that. So what I came up with was 8 different qualities kind of grouped into 4 different groups. So the first one is this idea of transparency and openness. And again, I think I see all of these qualities within the interlibrary loan community. Transparency meaning there's no hidden agenda, right? There's no hidden process. The process happens, and this is what the process is. And openness to receiving requests, whatever that is. And these are very much interrelated in a lot of ways, right? These concepts of this is how it happens, this is how it works. There's not going to be a hidden agenda. Very tightly coupled with that are the concepts or the qualities of integrity and honesty, right? We have guidelines that we have to follow, if we want to stay in business in certain respects, and being honest and open with each other. And that honesty comes out through in the humanity piece as well, I think. So again, very, very tightly integrated. Switching gears a little bit is this idea of both participation and inclusion. So participation meaning there is the opportunity for everyone to participate, whether it's an online platform or an interlibrary loan list, whatever that might be. There is that opportunity. Inclusion means that there's an active component to it, and it can take the form of a few different ways, many different ways, but it might be actively drawing people in. It might be specifically asking someone for their opinion, or specifically calling someone into the conversation, right? Or other ways that this works is simply acknowledging contributions. Thank you so much to Miriam, or thank you so much to Rebecca for doing this great work, or for providing this thing that I needed, which was exactly what I needed, right? That is a form of inclusion as well. And simply thanking people oftentimes is a way to build this healthy interaction, right? And then finally, these I think are really, these always make me smile. I don't know why. But this idea of we want to do excellent work, and we're also service-oriented. And that really makes, I think, our work stand out in a lot of different ways, is that we want to do our best job. We want to provide the quality. We want to provide the material that people are seeking. We don't want to provide something that's close. We want to provide what they want. And so this idea of quick service, quality service is just threaded through everything. And so these qualities continue to stand out to me even after, again, starting this 10 years ago. And what's fascinating to me, I think, is that it creates this environment of trust and safety, where we can be human, where we can bring our whole selves to it. And yes, I took the opportunity to throw a picture of my cats in there. But it does create this ability to adapt, this ability to have resilience, and this ability to have humor. And that is just really key, and something that, again, is I think rarer these days, or at least more rare these days, yet exemplified within this community. And so let me come back, and I'll stop saying the word community soon, but come back to this idea of community and how we might interact. So my first question is going to be, and you don't have to put this in the chat screen, well, you can if you want, is, are we a community? We're not in a central physical location. We don't have someone sitting next to us unless you're in a group somewhere. Are we a community? My answer is going to be yes, which you might have guessed. And at the same time, as a community, we're having to adapt to being online. This is a new experience. If you've attended before, this is a very different experience, and we're having to kind of interact in this environment. But we're together in a purpose. We're already active. I see the chat screen lighting up, so that's great. We have these shared interests and investment in what we're going to do over the next few days. Now, I'm going to throw out the word networking, but I want to kind of qualify that a little bit, because when you throw out the word networking, this is how I feel inside when I hear the word networking. You may have that same reaction. Because it's like, do we have to network? Nobody likes the word network, I think. But there are opportunities and difficulties, right, in a community that's in a purely online world. Many of us are doing more online meetings and that kind of thing. And so we've got a limited amount of time, limited amount of energy. Where do we put our efforts? How do we kind of maximize it? And also the aspect is this potentially less painful virtually? Is it easier to interact and share our stories online than it is in person? Or, are there opportunities there? But are there ways that we can strengthen our online community while we're operating in this isolated environment, at least physically isolated environment? And on the flip side, what if this weren't painful? What if this actually were more the experience that we had, where, we learn something new, we connect with someone that's really interesting or doing something really cool. Maybe we connect with mentors or peers or someone who inspires us and who might we want to connect with. So maybe we can aim towards this kind of experience instead. So what I want to do is encourage you. I'm going to share a few ideas on how we might do this over the course of of the conference. And I encourage you to share your ideas via chat as well. And then I think we're going to be at questions. So my first idea is actually something that's worked well for me in in-person conferences over the years. Is number one is if there's a session that you weren't planning on attending, attend that session. Attend a session that you didn't think you'd attend. The reason I put this up, and I'll share my experiences, usually I have the experience if I go to a session that looks really good and I get there and it's not very good. And I'm not saying that's going to happen here at all, but what I do is I go to another session that I didn't think I'd attend, and many times that turns out to be a really good session, and I learn new things that I wouldn't have learned in the other session if I stayed there. Again, I'm not encouraging you to jump around. Well, you can't jump around, but stay in the session. But if you had one that wasn't on your schedule, go to that one and see what happens. In the spirit of inclusion, find an opportunity to genuinely thank someone for their contributions. If you go to a great session, take a moment to send them a note and say, I heard this in your session. That really resonated with me, and I'm actually going to see how I might be able to use that in my own work. So thank you. That is a genuine thanks, where you thank someone for their contributions. It feels so great, as we all know, to get that kind of recognition and thanks, right? I encourage you to connect with someone who's doing something or working somewhere really cool. One of my I have a few kind of interesting / dream organizations that I think they're doing really cool stuff. I know some colleagues that work at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and I'm always intrigued on about what they're doing. And so I never necessarily know what they're doing, but I'm always interested in chatting with them just to hear what they're doing. And then finally, find something in common that is not about libraries. And that's where I think the Remo sessions are great. I've met a couple people already, which has been wonderful and had some really interesting conversations. And so I'm really looking forward to more of that. So this is where I am going to pause for questions. I do encourage you to connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn. You can send me email at my Oracle email address. I will share this networking tip from Inigo Montoya. I'll read this in case you don't have visual. So it's, as you know, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die, which is successful because it's a polite greeting. He gives his name, relevant personal link, you killed my father, and prepare to die. So with that, let me take a pause, and Miriam, let's see what we have for questions.
Yeah, but really quickly, and I'm hoping everyone can hear me here.
Yeah.
Really quickly, I'm going to drop the link in for filling in our little Q&A game here. And I'm going to stop your screen share for a moment.
Oh, yeah.
Go over to my screen share just so that everyone can see what our keyword for this session is, and the word is horse. So the link is in the chat, the main chat, and there's our keyword. So I just wanted to make sure everyone grabbed that, and I'm going to give you guys another minute or two here. I would recommend, if you're not able to get over there and fill it out quickly, to go ahead and write it down. You can fill it out shortly. The link is also in the notes at the top of the sched as well. So there you go. So would you like to have your screen share back up, or are you just happy to have your face up?
No, well, I'll go ahead and share again here.
Okay. So we're getting a really great presentation notes in the chat, but Q&A wise, some questions that we have. So we have, are there ways in which you find being restricted to do the pandemic opens up surprising advantage, or does the pandemic open up surprising advantages?
Yeah, I really think there are advantages. And what I didn't share is for much of my recent work, I have worked remotely. So I have not necessarily been in an office. So the adjustment to remote work for me, just as one aspect of this, has not been that great, or not been that drastic. But colleagues working differently, but Actually, Miriam, I might use you as an example, because part of what I've watched Miriam do over the course of this conference is shift from this assumption of a physical conference, right, to online conference. And Miriam, my guess is you probably were well versed in these technologies before. You are even more well versed now, and that's what I think, that's one of the strengths I think is coming out of the pandemic. Is out of necessity we're having to adapt in a variety of different ways as parents, as managers, as individual contributors. And it's hard to see right now, and it's hard to kind of distance ourselves from it, but we're learning new skills constantly. And I think it's going to be important for us, whenever we can, whenever we have the capability to step back and say, holy cow, I did this, I did that, this is all new stuff. And to be able to, as I mentioned, kind of articulate that value, to be able to say, to be able to add those to our resumes, right? I'll share one other aspect, and I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, is in chatting with one of the attendees yesterday, she was sharing about how she is actually joining more virtual singing groups. So, she attends at least a few every week and is connecting with other people in this shared interest. And it's really providing, from our conversation, it sounds like it's really providing a very bright spot throughout the week. And so things like that just weren't coming up before. I mean, they were, but there's all this new opportunity, I think. And so my answer is yes. My short answer is yes. I do think there's a lot, if we look for it, a lot coming out of the pandemic.
So this is kind of growing out of that question, but somebody did ask, how do you think COVID has impacted the larger resource sharing community? And I think that kind of comes out of the idea that you have some background in resource sharing, you're kind of an outsider looking in a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, so I was invited to kind of reflect on that a little bit for a publication, and one of the things that I thought came out of that, I think that we'll see going forward, is more, and maybe this is obvious, is more emphasis on digital resources and less on physical. Not to say physical are going away, but because in a way, so much has shifted to what is available digitally. I don't want this, but I do think we're going to see a shift even further away from physical, or more digitizing of physical materials to kind of maybe a good enough level, which again, that's not what I necessarily want to see personally, but that's my suspicion. And so, again, things like silver are really interesting and exciting to me. And so things like that are I think what you're going to continue to see is more innovation and more kind of interesting things happening in that way. I don't know if I fully answered the question, but.
I think that's a great statement to look at. We have another question, and just as a heads up, we only have about 5 minutes left, so if anyone has any additional questions to put in, please put them in now into the Q&A. So this question is, you had a lot of great advice at the end of this talk, and thank you for encouraging everyone to move outside their comfort zones. What would be one piece of advice to give early career or new librarians on how to be successful in this kind of community that has such a long history, but also a lot of innovation and new ideas?
Well stated. Great question. Drawing from my own experience and going into new situations, that's funny that you ask, this is something I was thinking of the other day, is the advantage of being someone new, and I'm going to phrase this poorly, but is you get to ask, quote, stupid questions, right? You get to go in and say, I have no idea what's going on here. Can you please tell me what's going on? You might not phrase it exactly like that, but taking that kind of approach, number one, you kind of have a little bit of a pass because you're new, to the profession, and it's not a pass. It's you are new, but I would encourage you to push yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit and feel free to connect with people that you may not know, but that you're interested in connecting with. Uh, there's the concept of the informational interview, which I really like, which is if you find somebody doing something really interesting, simply connecting with them and saying, I'd love to do an informational interview with you, which is just, it's not asking for a job. It's not, fishing for a job, though in a way it can lead to a job. But just sitting, taking 30 minutes and sharing about what you do, because I'm really interested. Maybe it's an area I'm interested in getting into, or maybe it's an area or, an organization that I'm interested in working with. So my experience has been with information professionals, degreed or not, doesn't matter. Almost everyone I've ever made that kind of suggestion to has been very open to it and very willing to share it with me.
I just had a question come in that I'm not 100% clear on. What suggestions do you have to emphasize or encourage the role of the patron in the ILL community? So I think it's in the role of Interlibrary loan.
So in other words, how do you engage that person?
I think so. I mean, I admit that I'm coming at this from the point of view of being in academics. So what's it encourage to emphasize or encourage the role of the patron? So often in Interlibrary loan, we have the situation where it's very much on us in the library to try to go after the patron to interact with us. So I think maybe this is maybe an outreach or marketing type of question, maybe?
Yeah, that's kind of my
yes, they just, yeah.
Yeah, and so, well, first of all, again, I think you're going to hear some of those suggestions in the outreach session, and so I think that's going to be worth your time. And I'm going back to my experience and kind of tying in my own efforts to essentially reach patrons within my organization. And sometimes that's through someone else. So if I were to use my public library experience, what I might do is, to use an informal phrase, chat up the librarians on the reference desk, for example, and kind of remind them, we do have interlibrary loan. So if you've got somebody who's got a really difficult request, an option you might give to them is, even if it's something that's not in our holdings, we might be able to get it through interlibrary loan. And so, that's going to a closer point of interaction to the patron to highlight that and, get them to, let them do your marketing job to some extent, right? But that's and that potentially helps make their job easier and helps them satisfy their patron a little bit more as well. Just one idea.
Yeah. I was just going to bring up that it was not uncommon for me in my small academic library to remind my reference librarians, my reference instruction librarians, that I was there to get things for patrons instead of them saying, oh, we don't have that, we can't get that, here, try these other resources. And I'm like, I can get that article for them in like 2 hours. Why not send them to me with that request and help them find something else? I might still be able to get it. We now have a question from someone about, and it'll be our last question, by the way. As someone who has worked in libraries for 11 years, but has just recently started their first professional librarian job, do you have advice for how to combat imposter syndrome as a comparatively young staff member? I've dealt with this. I would like to hear your answer on this myself.
Well, number one, I don't know that it goes away. I still deal with that myself. As a new professional, well, I guess I'd answer 2 ways. One is is to do kind of an inventory for yourself around, part of what I've talked about is kind of, in a way, cataloging and recognizing the qualities and the experience that you already do have. That's an excellent way, because I know for myself, I tend to forget. If it's not something I'm doing actively right now, I forget that I have all these, other skills and experiences that I've done that I can potentially draw on. That's one thing. The other thing is, I guess, is to maybe get comfortable with the idea not of imposter syndrome, but a new learner. It's kind of shifting that maybe negative feeling from that experience to a more positive feeling. And is imposter syndrome, I know there's a lot bundled into it, but is there a way that I can maybe shift it to, well, this is actually a huge learning opportunity for me. Yes, I'm supposed to have expertise in these areas, and I do have expertise in these areas, and they wouldn't have hired me maybe if I didn't have that expertise or that potential. But are there ways that I can continue to learn, even though I maybe find myself in a challenging position where it feels like this uphill battle, but maybe it's not, and maybe that's okay. That was a little bit of a squishy answer, but Miriam, I'm not sure what your thoughts are.
Well, no, I mean, I've been in the imposter syndrome situation, and honestly, you kind of just have to own it and live it and remind yourself every day that I know how to do this much of my job really well, and this part I'm learning, and you just kind of have to feel good with it. And acknowledge it and admit when you need a little bit of guidance, but also know that you wouldn't have gotten the job if you didn't think and they didn't think you could handle it.
Yeah.
On that note, we have about 13 minutes until at 11 o'clock for our next session, which is our first true session, which is Silver, Streaming Interlibrary Loan Video Resources, which is going to be convened by David Ketchum and being presented by Katie DeVitario, Summer Browning, and Philip Gaddis. And I am going to stop our recording now.